Usually, before I begin any address, I must be inclusive. And we do that as visually impaired people by describing how we look like, in case there are any other visually impaired people in the audience or watching at home. So let me start with a visual description of myself. Everyone here in the room can obviously see that I am a blonde-haired, blue-eyed Swiss woman. What? Why are you guys laughing? No, I am a 5'7"-ish black African woman, chocolate brown skin. Today I have my hair up in my natural afro, and I am wearing an Ankara jumpsuit with pointed black heels. So that's what I look like today. So I tried to persuade Seth to let me use my entire session to play you an Afro-acoustic set, but I was told that this audience does not like to make merry, they like to make money. So I will proceed. I'm not from a political family, I'm not from a wealthy family, and in fact, with a simple scan of my family, you will quickly find that I am not the most eloquent, nor the most educated amongst us. I'm the last child and the only one with a disability that was acquired when I was a teenager because of glaucoma. My eyesight began to decline, and there was absolutely nothing I could do to stop it. No person, no pill, no prayer could bring it back. When about 80% of it was gone, I remember being in the London Underground tube, having the most miserable of days. And then I had this inspired thought that really lifted my spirit. Does my disability have to be disabling? Right then, I began calling myself VIP, which stands for Visually Impaired Person. I didn't realize a few years later it would turn into Visually Impaired Parliamentarian, and perhaps sometime in the not-so-distant future, it may turn into Visually Impaired President. But I must confess that back then when I got into politics, if anyone told me what I would be a part of in service of my country, I'd have probably been like, no thank you, keep that. But for all intents and purposes, I walked into this job totally blind. I've been given the session title, Africa, the Forgotten Continent. But I wouldn't quite say that Africa was forgotten. I see it as being deliberately locked away, accessible only to European imperialism. Are there any last ones in the house? Well, I have found the youngest in the house to be the strongest. We're often expected to take what is given to us without question, and we're not to complain. But the youngest are also the most observant, the most creative. We see what goes unnoticed by others. Africa, the cradle of mankind, has a similar story to the youngest. It was forced to the back of the queue, relegated to last place. But there comes a time when any group wrongfully oppressed will decide that it is time to break free. And you'll see evidence of this all throughout history. African American oppression turned into the civil rights movement. Women's oppression turns into the feminist movement. And at home in Kenya, youth oppression turned into the Gen Z movement. This month being the one-year anniversary of a time that has forever changed our politics. Now, we're witnessing a new type of African liberation movement, one that has begun to recognize the exogenous origin of the idea that we are less than or beneath Europe in various ways. And technically we are. I mean, north, south, you know. But look at all the examples where we see what is beneath being inextricably needed to the above. The roots of a tree, the legs of a table, the foundation of a house, and of course, the global south pain fueling the global north prosperity. Africa is the youngest continent on Earth, with over 1.6 billion people, over 60% of us under the age of 25, and home to 60% of the planet's arable land. That's not a challenge. That is an extraordinary superpower. Across our continent, a powerful shift is happening. Countries like Ghana, Rwanda, Kenya, and Botswana are investing in local industries, in education and innovation. I agree with someone that said we have enough ideas and plans in Africa. What we need now is execution at an exceptional pace and scale. We're living in a time that history will remember, a time when African leaders, thinkers, entrepreneurs, and especially the youth are rising to say, we want something different. We want something better. The wave you see in many African nations is not a rebellion, it's a rebirth of African dignity, of African ownership, and of African direction. In this season of transformation, we must ask ourselves, where does Europe fit in all this? For decades, the African-Europe relationship has been shaped by the shadows of colonialism, control, and one-sided deals. The tactics employed after the Berlin Conference of 1884 to 1885 to create what ended up being a mass psychosis intended to strip away our identity and our values and our worth was absolutely diabolical. Because once you win someone's mind, you change their attitude, which ultimately shackles their altitude. That's why I say Africa was not forgotten. Our potential was purposely locked away. If Europe wants to remain relevant in Africa's story, it must earn it. Session after session, so far, you have predictably been thinking about East and West, China and America, but barely a word about Africa. And as leaders in this, we are called the same thing, to see what everyone else sees, but to think in ways that no one else thinks. Europe must shift from a position to dominance to one of collaboration, because we want a mutual future. Africa is not your colony, it's now your equal neighbor. And neighbors don't dictate, they dialogue. This is not a time for Europe to cling to ideology of the past. It's time to co-create the future. And as a swimmer myself, I can tell you that swimming against a current will not get you to the shore. Gone are the days of top-down development plans, economic hitmen, and extractive investment. Today, what we need is honest engagement, knowledge sharing, and investment that empowers, not controls. We want trade, not aid. We want opportunity, not charity. The EU is Africa's largest trade partner, but trade must be fair. African goods still face tariffs that European products do not. Africans still go through expensive, arduous visa processes to do business here that Europeans coming into Africa do not. And Africans continue to be disproportionately underpaid and in lower-level jobs than their European counterparts working in Africa. All that must change. We need European businesses and the people who run them to be present, not as saviors that know what's best, but as steady, honest allies, ones who respect our direction, our pace, and our voice. Trust, once broken, takes time to rebuild. But it's not impossible if we begin by agreeing to a bedrock principle of any strong relationship, that is transparency. We need transparency in deals, in development, in diplomacy. Too many agreements are signed in boardrooms, far from the eyes of the people they actually affect. And we are now demanding open books, fair terms, and real accountability. According to Transparency International, Africa loses over $50 billion every year to illicit financial flows, often aided by global systems. And as business people in the room, you know very well that systems are carefully designed to achieve their results, whether good or evil. Rebuilding our trust will mean fixing these systems, not just preaching ethics to Africans. Even today, there are still unfulfilled expectations in the Africa-Europe relationship. Promises of development, partnerships, investments in youth and infrastructure, many of which have not materialized in full, leaving behind not only economic gaps, but emotional ones too. A sense of being engaged by Europeans, but not truly valued by them. Of course, there are a long line of problematic leaders in Africa, like everywhere else, majority of whom are part of the old guard. But you can clearly see a natural attrition happening on the continent. A new breed of young, patriotic, benevolent, and equity-centered leaders are coming up in Africa. Leaders like me, who are loyal to the soil. These young African leaders are the ones you need to connect with and support their independence, because African citizens are now looking through their lens. And if the West wants to catch up to Africa's direction, it must first catch up to Africa's vision. Someone CC Emmanuel Macron, please. In closing, I think we can still write a better chapter, not with resentment, but with renewal. Relationships built on mutual respect, on shared success, on a deep understanding that Africa's rise does not threaten your place on our continent. It actually enhances it, like our cocoa beans do in your Swiss chocolate, makes it richer. I have a hot take before I finish. It's my submission that reparations for Africans from European imperialism won't be achieved through money. You don't have enough money in the world to undo what was done to us and to unlearn what was etched onto us. Besides, when did throwing money at a trust issue ever solve it? Instead, imagine this: African innovation paired up with European technology. African culture embraced in European classrooms. African industries rising through partnerships that respect our sovereignty and add value locally. That's not a fantasy. That can be a choice. But Africa sent me here to tell you that you're going to have to earn it. Thank you very, very much.